You're safe with me.
Thank you for seeing me.
Why would a black waitress waste her last $8 on a white billionaire? He wouldn't have done the same for you. That was the first comment under the video that would later break the internet. But before the headlines, the praise, and the cameras, there was just rain, silence, and a choice. Nyla Jennings didn't plan to be a hero. She wasn't trying to go viral. She was just a 26-year-old waitress finishing a double shift at a no-name diner in downtown Atlanta. Her back ached, her sneakers were soaked, and she clutched the tip jar in her apron. $12. $4 for the bus, $8 for a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk for her little brother Josiah. That was the plan until a black luxury car hydroplaned across the intersection and slammed into a power pole just yards away. The driver's side was crushed, the windshield cracked like ice, the airbags didn't go off. People gathered, phones were out, but no one moved. One man even said, "Let him rot, he probably owns half the city." Nyla ignored the noise. She pushed through the crowd. Blood was running down the man's temple. His pulse was weak. No one would help her lift him. No cabs would stop. Not for him, one driver scoffed. Not tonight. So she ran 3 blocks, in the rain, into a 24-hour pharmacy. With her last $8, she bought gauze, disinfectant, and aspirin. No questions asked. She came back, cleaned the wound, called 911, and stayed until they arrived. Before they loaded him into the ambulance, the man barely conscious grabbed her wrist. "What's your name?" he whispered. "Nyla," she said, gently. His eyes met hers. "Thank you for seeing me. This is a black story you haven't heard. One that started with $8, ended with millions, and somewhere in the middle, changed 2 lives forever. You're watching Hidden Worth, real stories that uncover what people are truly made of. If this hit you in the heart already, stay with us. You won't believe what happens next." Nyla Jennings had the kind of smile that made strangers pause. Bright, warm, effortless. The kind of smile that came from deep within, even when life gave her every reason not to wear it. But in Atlanta's South Side, that smile didn't pay the bills. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't protect her from the world's judgment. At 26, Nyla was already someone's everything. Her little brother Josiah, 7 years old, sharp as a whip and too kind for this world, was all she had left. Their mom had overdosed 3 years ago. One moment, she was promising to get clean. The next, she was gone. No goodbye, no second chance. Child services showed up, but Josiah clung to Nyla like a life raft, and she wouldn't let go. So she stepped up, worked nights, picked up double shifts, cleaned tables, took every birthday party job and church catering gig she could find, anything to keep Josiah fed, in school, and in clean clothes. She lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a part of town where sirens sang more often than birds. Rent was $900 a month, not including utilities, and the fridge always felt a little too empty. But Nyla made it work. Somehow, she always did. Daryl's Diner became her second home. The booths were torn, the coffee burned, and the tips were thin, but it was steady. The other waitresses were mostly older women who called her baby and smoked menthols on their breaks. The cooks respected her hustle, but the manager never learned her name. Customers? They noticed her skin before her smile. Some asked if she was even legal. Others left Bible tracts instead of tips. One man told her flat out, "If you were lighter, you'd probably get more money." She laughed it off. She always did. But the words stayed, like smoke in her clothes. What no one saw was the Nyla who stayed up late sewing patches on Josiah's jeans. The Nyla who skipped lunch so he could have seconds. The Nyla who whispered affirmations to herself in the mirror before every shift. You are more than their opinion. You are enough. She never asked for praise, never expected help, and she definitely didn't believe in fairy tales. But all it takes is one night, one moment, one decision. And for Nyla Jennings, that moment was about to arrive. It started like any other Friday night at Daryl's Diner, loud, rushed, and laced with the smell of fried onions and burnt coffee. The booths were full, the wait list was backed up, and Nyla had been on her feet since 2 p.m. Her knees ached, her apron was already stained, and her ponytail hung heavy with sweat. But still, she smiled. Table 7 changed all that. A group of 3 white men in golf polos and loud voices. Out-of-towners, most likely. One of them had a Rolex that flashed every time he pointed at something on the menu like it was a joke. "Look at this, boys," he said, grinning. "She's got that southern hospitality, huh?" The others chuckled as Nyla set down their waters. She gave the same smile she gave everyone. Polite. Professional. Measured. But then came the comments. "You sound cute, sugar. Where'd you learn to talk like that?" one asked, exaggerating her accent. "Hey, smile again. You got those Beyoncé lips." It wasn't the first time. Probably wouldn't be the last. Nyla had learned the art of polite deflection. She took their order, nodded, and walked back to the kitchen, her fists clenched in her apron. Lisa, another waitress, noticed. "Let me guess," she said, smirking. "Table 7? Nyla nodded. Lisa lit a cigarette at the back door and said, "Girl, if you ever want to stop getting treated like that, you need to tone it down a shade or two." Nyla blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean lighten up, literally. Get a little makeup, something subtle, something brighter. You'd be amazed what a little less melanin can get you in tips." Nyla didn't respond. She just looked down at her hands, dark and steady. The same hands that made Josiah's breakfast every morning, tied his shoes, fixed his homework. She didn't need lighter skin. She needed people to see her humanity. Back at the table, the men snapped their fingers for her like she was a dog. One of them dropped a dollar bill on the floor and waited for her to pick it up. Nyla didn't flinch. She served the food, filled their drinks, and smiled through clenched teeth. When they finally left, they tipped her 75 cents and a used napkin with a phone number. She tossed both in the trash. No one clapped. No one stood up for her. That's just how it was. Just another shift in a world that asked her to carry herself with grace while everyone else got to act out. But still, Nyla stayed. Because rent was due. Josiah needed shoes. And sometimes, survival meant swallowing your pride with your coffee. The clock hit 12:47 a.m. when Nyla finally stepped out of the diner. Her body ached from the 12-hour shift, but the air outside was cool and crisp. Atlanta's streets were quiet at that hour, just the hum of streetlights and the occasional rumble of a car in the distance. Her sneakers squished with each step, soaked through from wiping a spill in the back kitchen. She zipped up her hoodie and pulled it tighter around her neck. Clutched in her apron pocket were the night's tips, $12 and some change. Not enough, never enough, but just barely enough to make it to payday. She crossed the intersection near 5th and Booker. The streetlight buzzed above her. Across the road, the bus stop shelter flickered, half lit by a dying bulb. That's when she heard it, a screech, the unmistakable sound of tires losing grip. A black luxury sedan came flying around the corner, too fast for the wet pavement. It spun once, then twice, before slamming nose first into a power pole with a crunch of metal that echoed down the block. Nyla froze. Smoke rose from the hood. The airbags hadn't deployed. The windshield cracked like a spiderweb under pressure. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a car alarm howled into the night. She sprinted toward the wreck. Inside, she saw him. A man white, maybe in his late 40s, dressed in a suit. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. His hands were limp on the steering wheel. His head lolled slightly with every shift in the wind. A few other people emerged from buildings nearby. Phones came out. Cameras started rolling. But no one got closer. No one called for help. Nyla shouted, "Somebody call 911. Silence. One woman shook her head. That man's probably got 3 lawyers and 0 conscience. Let him figure it out. A guy next to her muttered, "Looks like one of those corporate crooks. Should have been driving something with airbags." Nyla didn't care who he was, CEO or janitor, rich or poor. He was a man bleeding on the side of the road, and he needed help. She reached for the door, locked. She banged on the window. No response. That's when something shifted in her chest. She wasn't going to stand by and watch someone die. Not tonight. Not on her watch. By the time Nyla circled around to the passenger side, more people had gathered. A half circle of spectators stood under awnings and bus stop covers, dry and distant. Some were in pajamas. A few had dogs on leashes. Most had their phones out recording, scrolling, narrating. No one moved to help. She waved frantically. "Can someone please help me open the door?" A man in a hoodie, maybe mid-30s, scoffed. "Nah, you don't want to get involved. That car, that suit, whoever he is, he's got lawyers. You touch him, and they'll sue you for breathing." Nyla ignored him and tried the door again, still locked. Another woman chimed in, filming from the sidewalk. "I think he's one of those Wall Street types, probably drunk. Let the cops deal with it. He'd step over you if the roles were reversed." A younger guy added, "Facts, rich folks never lift a finger for us." Nyla turned to them. "He's unconscious, he could be dying." But their eyes stayed on their screens, not on the man in the car, not on her. One by one, the comments came. "You're wasting your time. He probably doesn't even tip his waitstaff. He'll wake up and call you a thief. You're too good for this, sis." She felt her stomach twist, not from their words, but from their indifference. Not because they were wrong, but because maybe, in some ways, they weren't. Still, she couldn't just walk away. She pounded on the window. "Sir? Can you hear me?" Nothing. She turned toward the street, saw headlights, a cab. She ran into the road, waving both arms. The cab slowed, rolled down the window just enough to speak. "There's a man in that car," she said, breathless. "He needs help. Can you take us to the hospital?" The driver glanced over, saw the wreck, saw the man, then looked at her, and rolled his eyes. "Not tonight," he muttered. "I ain't trying to get blood on my seats, especially not for some rich guy who probably owns half the cops in this city." He pulled off without another word. Nyla stood in the rain, soaked to her skin, fists clenched. No one was coming. The people around her? Still filming. Still judging. She looked down at her apron pocket, $8 left. And that's when she made the choice that would change her life forever. Nyla didn't hesitate. She didn't need anyone's approval, didn't wait for backup, didn't expect applause. She turned and sprinted down the street, water sloshing in her shoes, rain slicing across her cheeks like tiny knives. Her lungs burned, but she didn't slow down. 3 blocks. That's how far it was to the 24-hour pharmacy. Inside, the lights buzzed bright and sterile. The cashier, a college kid barely out of high school, glanced up from his phone. "I need first aid stuff," Nyla gasped. "Gauze, something to stop bleeding, and aspirin, or baby aspirin." He blinked, still chewing his gum. "What happened?" "Car crash. He's bleeding bad, unconscious. Ambulance isn't here yet." She slapped the $8 on the counter, the last cash she had. The kid pointed. "Aisle 3. She didn't wait. She ran, grabbed a roll of gauze, a small bottle of hydrogen peroxide, and a box of aspirin. No time to check brands. No time to calculate sales tax. She handed the items to the cashier. He rang them up. Total, $7.81. She snatched the bag, mumbled a thank you, and ran back into the storm. By the time she returned to the scene, the crowd had mostly thinned. Just a few people remained still watching, still not helping. The man in the car was slumped lower now, head tilted, lips slightly parted. Nyla reached through the passenger window, still cracked just enough to unlock the door from the inside. She opened it and climbed halfway in, careful not to jostle him too much. She soaked a tissue in peroxide, pressed it gently to his head. The wound hissed and foamed. He didn't react. Then she unwrapped the gauze and wrapped it around his forehead, hands shaking but precise, just like she'd done with Josiah the time he fell off the jungle gym. She tore open the aspirin package and placed 2 under his tongue. "Come on," she whispered. "Stay with me." She dialed 911 again, gave the dispatcher the address, and demanded urgency. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights bounced off the wet pavement. As the paramedics lifted him onto the gurney, one of them looked at her. "Are you family?" he asked. "No," she said, brushing soaked curls from her face. "Just someone who saw him." The man opened his eyes for a moment, just a flicker of awareness. His hand reached out, weak and trembling, and caught her wrist. "What's your name?" he whispered. "Nyla." He blinked slowly. "Thank you for seeing me." And just like that, He was gone, doors closed, sirens faded. She stood there, soaked, broke, alone. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. The moment his fingers brushed against her wrist, time seemed to slow. His grip was weak, barely there, but intentional. Like somewhere beneath the bruises and blood, he understood. Like he knew exactly what had just happened. "What's your name?" he whispered, voice hoarse and barely audible over the rain and chaos. "Nyla," she replied softly, leaning closer so he could hear her. His eyes opened just a sliver, blue, glassy, unfocused, but they locked on hers for the briefest second. And in that second, Nyla saw something she didn't expect: fear, gratitude, humility, and maybe shame. "Thank you for seeing me," he murmured, each word a struggle. And then his eyes closed again. The EMTs moved fast, lifting him into the back of the ambulance. The doors slammed shut, and the sirens wailed as the vehicle sped off into the night. Nyla stood there, frozen, water dripping from her chin, her breath visible in the cold air, her heart pounding with a strange rhythm, part panic, part peace. She didn't know who he was, didn't ask, didn't care. But his words echoed in her head. "Thank you for seeing me." They weren't just about saving his life. They were about everything else, the way she looked past his skin, his wealth, his status, and saw a human being who needed help. Something no one else had done that night. No one else had even tried. Back at the diner, she would have been invisible. Just another black waitress with tired eyes and a polite smile. But in that moment, drenched in rain and lit only by the flicker of a busted street lamp, she was the only person who mattered. She didn't realize it then, but that one act, that $8 act of kindness, had already set a chain of events in motion. One that would flip her life upside down. One that the world would soon be watching. Morning came too early. Nyla woke to the sound of cartoons buzzing on the old TV in the living room, and Josiah singing off-key to the theme song. She blinked at the ceiling, disoriented. For a moment, she thought last night had been a dream. The accident, the rain, the man's bloody face, the ambulance lights disappearing into the distance. But the soaked sneakers by the door and the empty $8 space in her wallet said otherwise. She got up, her body still aching, and shuffled to the kitchen. No milk, no bread, just a single egg and a heel of sandwich bread in a torn plastic bag. She sighed and scrambled it anyway. Josiah didn't complain. He never did. "I'll grab more after work," she told him, ruffling his curls. Then came the knock. 3 short raps, sharp, measured. Nyla paused, wiping her hands on a towel. She wasn't expecting anyone. Rent wasn't due for another week, and she hadn't ordered anything. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. 6 black SUVs lined the curb in front of her apartment building. Their windows were tinted, their engines still running. At her doorstep stood a man in a tailored navy suit, an earpiece in one ear, and a tablet in hand. Behind him, a woman with a clipboard and a warm but practiced smile. "Miss Nyla Jennings?" the woman asked. Yeah?" The suited man nodded and stepped aside. "We're here on behalf of Mr. Barrett Keene." The name meant nothing to Nyla at first. Then the woman handed her a sealed envelope. "Mr. Keene asked us to deliver this to you personally. He also requests a brief meeting, at your convenience." Nyla stared at them. Is he okay?" "He's recovering well," the woman said. "He's very grateful, and very insistent that we find you." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note, just one line. "I meant what I said. Thank you for seeing me. Let me return the favor." Below it, an address, a time, and a contact number. Josiah peeked around her waist. "Who are they, Nyla?" She looked down at him, then back up at the fleet of vehicles. "I think something big just happened." The building was nothing like Nyla had ever seen. Downtown Atlanta's skyline stretched behind her as the elevator ascended, silent, smooth, and wrapped in polished gold trim. She clutched her purse tightly, heart pounding. She had never set foot in a high-rise like this. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, security guards in suits with faces carved from stone. Josiah had stayed with a neighbor. She told him she had a quick meeting, but the truth was, she had no idea what she was walking into. When the elevator doors opened, a receptionist greeted her with a polite nod. "Miss Jennings, right this way." She was led down a long hallway lined with framed magazine covers, Forbes, Time, Business Weekly, all featuring the same man, tall, silver-haired, with piercing blue eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. Barrett Keene. The office at the end of the hall was huge, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist decor, and a single desk made from what looked like reclaimed oak. Behind it stood the man himself. No longer bruised, but paler than his magazine photos. A small bandage above his left eyebrow, but his presence was unmistakable. He looked like power. And yet, when he saw her, he smiled not like a CEO, but like a man who was genuinely relieved. "Nyla," he said, "I wasn't sure you'd come." She stood frozen. I wasn't sure either." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please, sit." She did. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I've spent my whole life being surrounded by people who look through me. Even the ones who say they work for me, respect me, they don't really see me. They see the name, the money, the leverage." He looked her straight in the eyes. "But that night, you saw a human being, not a headline, not a bank account, just me." Nyla didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened. "I owe you my life," he said simply. "But more than that, I owe you a chance." She blinked. "A chance at what?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "A chance to be seen the way you deserve to be seen, with dignity, with power, and with options." Then he slid a folder across the desk. "Let's talk about what's next." And just like that, the story was no longer about saving his life. It was about changing hers. Nyla didn't open the folder right away. She stared at it, hands resting gently on the sleek black cover, as if touching it might change everything because somehow, she knew it already had. Barrett watched her quietly, giving her space. No pressure, no rush, just presence. Finally, she lifted the cover. Inside were documents, neatly organized in color-coded tabs. The first tab read, "Housing." Her eyes widened. A letter from a real estate firm. A confirmation of ownership transfer. Her apartment, the tiny, run-down 2-bedroom unit with leaky pipes and creaky floors, was paid off in full. No rent, no eviction notices, no landlords pounding on her door at the end of every month. The second tab, Education. A full scholarship for Josiah. Private elementary school, all expenses covered. Uniforms, meals, supplies, even a prepaid college fund, locked and guaranteed. Nyla felt her chest tighten. She hadn't even dared to dream that far ahead. The third tab, Transportation. A photo of a modest but brand new hybrid SUV. Not flashy, but reliable. Safe. Insured. Already registered in her name. She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Barrett leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "I spent a lot of time thinking about how to say thank you," he said. "Money is easy, checks are easy, but I didn't want to just pay you off. I wanted to lift you up. You gave me more than first aid that night. You gave me perspective." Nyla swallowed hard. She didn't know how to respond. No one had ever given her something without expecting something in return. No one had ever looked at her life and decided it deserved more. Barrett continued, "These are just starting points. You don't owe me anything. You don't have to take it. But if you want, this can be the beginning of something bigger." Nyla blinked away tears. "What about Josiah? Does he know?" Barrett smiled. "Not yet. I wanted you to be the one to tell him." She closed the folder, hugging it to her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was treading water. She felt seen. Not pitied, not rescued. Empowered. And this was only the beginning. Nyla had barely processed the gifts when Barrett spoke again. "There's one more thing," he said, reaching into a drawer and pulling out another folder, this one thinner, but no less important. She braced herself. Barrett slid it across the table. "This," he said, "is a job offer." Nyla stared at him, confused. "A job?" He nodded. "Not just any job. I want you to work with me. Specifically, at the Keene Foundation. It's a branch of my company that funds programs for underserved communities. We're building a new division focused on women of color, helping them access education, career training, and mental health support. Nyla blinked. Why me? Barrett didn't flinch. Because you've lived it. Because you know what it's like to be overlooked. And because you didn't wait for someone else to act, you did what most people wouldn't. That's leadership. She looked down at the paperwork. The title, Community Outreach Coordinator. Full-time, flexible hours, he continued. Training included. Starting salary $55,000 a year, plus benefits. Nyla's hands trembled. She had never made more than $15,000 in a year. But I'm not qualified, she said quietly. Barrett leaned in. You are more than qualified. You have empathy, resilience, grit. Everything else can be taught. It was overwhelming, all of it. A home, a car, school for Josiah, and now, a future. Nyla thought about all the nights she had scrubbed grease from diner floors, counted tips in silence, and whispered affirmations just to make it through another day. She had never thought someone like her could end up in a place like this, with someone like him being offered a seat at a table she never knew existed. But here it was. I need some time to think, she said honestly. Barrett smiled. Of course, no pressure. This isn't charity, Nyla. It's a partnership. You choose how the next chapter goes. She nodded slowly, the weight of possibility settling on her shoulders, but this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt powerful. For the first time, Nyla wasn't surviving, she was deciding. And just outside that office window, the sun had finally broken through the gray. A new day. A new story. And it belonged to her. The story broke 3 days later. It started with a local blog post, Black Waitress Saves Billionaire CEO with Last $8. Just a few paragraphs, no sensational headlines, just facts, quietly told. But the internet doesn't stay quiet for long. By the end of the week, national news stations had picked it up. Morning shows, talk shows, podcasts. It was everywhere. The New York Times ran a full-length feature. TikTok users created emotional edits using clips of Nyla walking Josiah to school and Barrett shaking her hand at the foundation's opening ceremony. The story struck a nerve. Not just because of who Barrett Keene was, a man known more for hostile takeovers than human connection, but because of who Nyla Jennings wasn't. She wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. She wasn't looking for a spotlight. She was simply kind. And the world wasn't used to seeing kindness from people who had nothing left to give. Comment sections flooded with praise. Thousands wrote, "She's what this world needs more of." Others admitted, "I don't know if I would have done what she did. That makes me think." But not all the reactions were flattering. Some accused Barrett of using Nyla for PR. Others questioned her motives. A few made ugly comments about race, suggesting she only got attention because of who she saved. Nyla stayed silent. She didn't post, didn't argue. She went to work at the foundation every morning, walked Josiah to school, and answered emails at her new desk, one with her name etched on a brass plate. One afternoon, she ran into a couple from the diner, the same ones who used to wave her away like she was background noise. The woman hesitated. "Nyla, we saw you on TV. We just wanted to say, we were wrong. About everything." Nyla smiled politely. "Thank you." She didn't need an apology. She didn't need validation. Because the world had finally stopped looking through her and started seeing her for who she truly was. Not a server. Not a savior. A woman with worth. A woman with a name. And the dignity that should have always come with it. 1 year later, Nyla stood on a stage. Not behind a diner counter, not on the sidelines, but at the center of a brightly lit auditorium filled with women, most of them black and brown, most of them struggling, and most of them unsure if the world would ever really make space for them. She looked down at her notes, then back up at the crowd. Josiah sat in the front row, dressed in a tiny blazer and beaming like the Sunday. Barrett Keene was beside him. No cameras, no spotlight, just a proud friend, watching quietly. Nyla cleared her throat and spoke into the mic. "A year ago, I was invisible. I served people who never looked me in the eye. I smiled through insults. I scraped together tips so my brother could eat. and I told myself it was just the way things were. She paused. Until one night, I stopped waiting for someone to do the right thing, and I became that someone. Applause erupted, but it wasn't for drama or spectacle, it was for truth. Nyla wasn't just working at the foundation anymore. She was running a program of her own, Rise Up, a mentorship initiative for young women of color looking for work, guidance, and most of all, belief. She had trained over 60 women in the past year, helped dozens find jobs, provided therapy access, resume support, and childcare stipends. Real help, not charity, not pity. One act, one night, one choice. That's all it took to shift her entire life. And the lesson? It wasn't just about kindness. It was about seeing people. Looking past race, past wealth, past assumptions, and choosing to act when it's easier to look away. When asked what kept her going, Nyla said it simply. Someone once told me, "Thank you for seeing me. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure no one feels invisible again." As the audience rose to its feet, Nyla smiled. This time, her smile wasn't tired. It was full, grounded, real. And if this story moved you even just a little, do something with that feeling. Don't just scroll, don't just watch. See people, really see them. That's what we do here on Hidden Worth. We tell Black stories that matter. Stories that remind us all what it means to be human. So if you believe in stories that reveal more than just headlines, if you believe in dignity, in courage, in the quiet heroes among us, hit subscribe, share this video, and leave a comment with one act of kindness you'll do this week. Because someone out there is waiting to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, that someone is you.